Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We are happy to have Ellen Lupton, Jennifer, Tobias, and Silas Munro for this talk. I want to share a little bit about SODA, and so you can, visit our website and learn more later. So SODA, the Society of Design Arts, was founded over 15 years ago in Baltimore by all volunteer group of teachers, students, and design professionals. All of them were passionate about the multiple histories of design arts, including graphic design, illustration, architecture, book arts, photography, and many more. SODA has provided more than 100 programs that have explored the diverse subjects. To have a better idea of our past programs, please check out our website at sodabaltimore.com. And while you're there, sign up on our mailing list to find out about future events. In our website, you see that since 2019, we have been continuously co-hosting events with AIGA Baltimore and building together a community interested in design history and its positive impact on design practice and contemporary life. If you're interested in helping to plan, research, and present programs, please feel free to reach out to us. So we also have with us tonight, besides our presenters, we have Francis Miller, who is the new president of AIGA Baltimore. And I invite Francis to talk a little bit about AIGA. So hi, Francis.
Hi everyone. Thank you. I do see a lot of familiar names in the chat and in the panelists or the participants, so hello. But for those who are not familiar, AIGA Baltimore is Charm City's chapter of AIGA, the Professional Association for Design. And like Raquel said, I'm the new president of AIGA Baltimore. AIGA is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The main goal is to advance design as a professional craft, a strategic advantage, and a vital cultural force. We in Baltimore are just one of 75, maybe more, chapters run 100% by volunteer leaders all across the nation. So if you're not in Baltimore or nearby, you can definitely find a chapter near you. So you can find those at aiga.org, as well as virtual events happening across the country by different chapters at aiga.org/events. So more events like this. And if you're interested in specifically Baltimore and the greater Baltimore area, we're at baltimore.aiga.org. We would love to talk to you not only about joining us for an event or becoming a member, but we have lots of volunteer leadership opportunities. And I've found that they're a great way to grow professionally and really make friends and not just kind of network in the terms of handing out your business card and that type of thing, but really, getting to know people in the industry nearby. So plug there, please volunteer, and you don't need to have a design background or any prior leadership experience. So we would love to, talk to you more about that. And I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Francis. Yeah, so please visit sodabaltimore.com and baltimore.aiga.org. Sorry about that, but we have the link in the chat. Visit our website and check out the upcoming events and all the opportunities that we have there. So before I introduce our very special presenters, if you have any questions, you're welcome to send them to us. And we're gonna hold a Q&A session after the presentations. So please post your questions using the Q&A feature that help us to go through the questions. Laurie Rubeling from SODA will be helping us to go over your questions. Thank you, Laurie. So we have with us this evening Ellen Lupton, Jennifer Tobias, and Silas Munro. They will present a case study about the book Extra Bold, a feminist, inclusive, anti-racist, non-binary field guide for graphic designers. And they will tell us some stories and ideas that don't show up in other design histories. So a little bit about Ellen. She's the senior curator of contemporary design at Cooper Hewitt, the Smithsonian Design Museum in New York City. She has curated several amazing exhibitions and wrote very important books about graphic design and design in general. So also Ellen is design chair at MICA in Baltimore, where she has authored, as I mentioned, numerous books on design, and some titles include Thinking with Type, Graphic Design Thinking, and Graphic Design, The New Basics. Her recent books, Design is Storytelling and Health Design Thinking, were published by Cooper Hewitt, and Ellen is an AIGA Gold Medalist and a Fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. So I wanna also introduce you Jennifer Tobias. Jennifer is, one sec, I'm back. Jennifer is a scholar and illustrator. She holds a PhD in art history from the City University of New York, and MLS from Rutgers, and a BFA from Cooper Union. She provided reader services at the Museum of Modern Art and Parsons School of Design libraries. Her illustrations are included in Health Design Thinking and Design Storytelling, both by Ellen Lupton. And our third presenter, Silas Munro, is a partner of Polymode by Coastal Design Studio in the US that creates poetic research, learning design, artistic practice, and applied design with clients in the cultural sphere, innovative businesses, and community-based organizations, including Mark Bradford, MoMA, OCMA, and the New Museum. Munro's writing appears in Eyes, Lancet, and W.E.B. Du Bois Data Portraits, Visualizing Black America. Munro is an associated professor at Otis and advisor at VCFA. Hello, and welcome. And
thank you.
Ellen, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I love being here. Thank you, SODA and AIGA Baltimore. I just love coming to these events. And it's funny to be doing an event in Baltimore from my room, where I've been the last 18 months, all over the world from this room. So I'm really excited to share Extra Bold, which is our new book that just came out in May. And the book has 7 co-authors. This is my star map of the amazing, talented designers who worked on this book and created this inclusive picture of working in design and thinking about design and teaching design. And in addition to those 7 co-authors, there are dozens of contributors in the book, people whose artwork, interviews, reprints of essays, illustrations. Some of them are historical figures who you'll hear about tonight, and some are contemporary scholars and designers like Silas, who's going to speak tonight too. And we decided, since SODA is our host, to focus on the part of the book devoted to history. And it's turned out that this section of the book, people really enjoy it. It's been very popular. We've had great conversations about it. And our point of view about history is to try to make it more inclusive, to tell new stories, and to really invite everybody to participate in creating this history. So our book is just a few examples of people whose stories are so important and sometimes overlooked. And what lies ahead is the incredible work to be done by everyone, the incredible work that Silas has been doing the last year especially. And so we really see history as a kind of invitation to participate. And this work is work that I've been doing at MICA, where I teach graphic design history with Brockett Horn, and where we're trying to teach the history of graphic design in a more inclusive way. We're inspired by our colleague, Kalina Sales, who talks about stretching the canon. So how can we tell a story that that includes, you know, the profession and how we got to where we got as designers, but tells that story not as a straight line of triumph of one group of people, but really sort of problematizes it and looks for the gaps and the myths and the dominance that is always there in that story. So I'm going to tell two stories about extra bold history that are in our book. And these stories ask the question, who had access to the tools of publishing? People from different communities over time were able to use these tools for their own ends, their political ends, economic survival, creative expression. So first, we're going to take a little trip to 16th century Paris, which was a center of the global printing industry. And I want to give you a sense of what this industry was like. It was very high tech. It was the Google of its time. It required a lot of capital to be in the printing and publishing business. You needed to have a lot of employees. You needed a network for distributing books. You needed knowledge of legal issues and also knowledge of content. So printers and publishers were the same. They were putting out books to sell in the marketplace and working with authors and doing all the physical production. So an interesting story is that in 16th century Paris, women published 1,250 book titles. And we know this because of the incredible research of a historian, Beatrice Hibbard Beach, who published a great piece about this in the journal Medieval Prosopography. That's a field I never knew existed. And there's so much design history that has been written, but not surfaced into our discipline in stories that we can share with our students and with other designers. So 1,250 books published by women in Paris. We have to compare that to London, where only 85 books were published by women. Now, what was it about French women that got them into the publishing industry? Was it because they don't finish all their chocolate cake? Is that their special something? Well, no, actually not. So I want to show you the criteria by which you could become a woman publishing books in Paris. 1, you had to be the daughter of a printer. 2, you had to marry a printer. 3, you had to have babies. And 4, your husband had to be dead. Okay. Now, why the babies? What does that have to do with printing? Well, if you had babies, then you could legally inherit your husband's property. Women who were widowed without children could not inherit property. They were on their own. And one of these printers was Yolande Bonhomme, who published books across France, Germany, Switzerland, the Netherlands. She employed 25 workers and also contracted work out to other printers in Paris. And this is one of her beautiful books. And we know it's hers because she put her name on the title page. And that signature of these women printers is why historians have been able to do this laborious work of counting the projects that were published by women. So let's take a trip to the American colonies in the 1700s, where widows with children were also permitted to inherit their husbands' businesses. So the story I will tell you starts with Ben Franklin, who as a teenager learned to print from his brother James. And James married Anne Smith, and Anne and James had babies, and James died. And thus Anne Smith became a printer known as the Widow Franklin, a successful printer in the colony of Rhode Island. And she printed all kinds of stuff, including legal documents, novels, her own newspaper, her famous brother-in-law's newspaper she ended up selling to the people of Rhode Island, and local gossip, which was very popular. And so here's a drawing of the print shop by my beloved friend, Jennifer Tobias. She worked with her children in the print shop. And here she might be explaining to her daughter, what does a woman need to succeed in this industry? A sturdy press, a few good fonts, a strong head for business, and a dead husband. It is also known that Anne Franklin owned a slave, and he worked in the print shop alongside her family. And this was not uncommon for enslaved people to be hired out to printing companies. And there's a whole amazing history to be told of the role of enslaved people in the printing industry. And one of these stories is the story of James Wells Brown, who worked in a print shop in St. Louis while he was enslaved. He later became a free man and a prominent abolitionist, feminist, novelist, and historian. Learning to print was his gateway to literacy. That's how he learned to read and write. And he learned the craft as well as the business of printing and took that knowledge with him into his career as an abolitionist, during which he published his own autobiography. And like many abolitionists, he gave numerous public lectures on the lecture circuit, and he sold his books at these events. And so for these abolitionists, their work as publishers was part of their expression, part of their public work, part of their political voice, but it was also economically essential to them. He arranged to have casts made of the printing forms of his autobiography so that he could continue to publish his book independently. And he carried these plates with him on his travels. One of the editions of his autobiography was published in Dublin from the plates owned by William Wells Brown. So it's a wonderful story that he owned his own stereotypes, which is where that word stereotype comes from. It's from the printing process and these lightweight casts made of printing. And that's Jennifer's amazing drawing in the context of our book. And I'm going to pass it over to Jennifer to tell some stories about history. Thank you.
Hi. Well, I'm happy to add to the conversation. I'm going to share my screen now. And what I'd like to do is speak about several different historical figures that we looked into and learned about for the book. It was a wonderful exploration. Some of these stories are well known, some less so. There are many more to tell. So I'm going to talk about Annie Albers, Charlotte Perrion, Marcel Moore, and Claude Cahun, Susan Sontag, and Willie Smith. So starting with designer, textile artist, and all-around cool person, Annie Albers, in the book, we drew upon the work of a colleague of mine named Sarah Torres, who perceived that Annie's story, like so many artists, was not linear. Like Ellen said, we did not, go in a linear fashion and uniformly, conquer the world. That careers and lives, especially for people who might be marginalized, are twisted and turning and filled with difficult decisions. So what we did is, in the book, we decided to make that into kind of a make your own adventure story, an actual literal flow chart, like Sarah did, in showing the different forks in the road that Annie Albers had to take. So what I'd like to do now is just step through some of those decisions that she had to make. So it starts with a young Annie in Germany, discovering this new thing called modernism and really getting into it and deciding that she wants to be a modern artist. And so what does she do? She learns that Oskar Kokoschka, the expressionist painter, is living nearby, and she knocks on his door and says, "Let us be modern artists together." And as I tried to illustrate here, it did not go well. Oskar was not as encouraging as one might be. And so Ani was faced with a decision. Does she go back to her nice bourgeois lifestyle and live the life that was expected of her, perhaps become a traditional or academic painter? Or does she go to this new place called the Bauhaus? But that's not an easy decision either. Of course, as we know, she gets off the sofa and she decides to go to the Bauhaus. But even then, she's faced with a quandary. It turns out, I did not know this before our project, that women had to pay more to attend the Bauhaus, and we illustrated this based on a famous photograph of Bauhaus faculty with a little nod to Herbert Bayer's typography there. So so Ani had to decide, like, am I going to stand for this? Am I going to shell out? And she did, to history's credit. But then even when she was enrolled, there was another dilemma to face. There were only certain programs that were open to women, such as bookbinding and weaving. And had she chosen the path of bookbinding, it turns out that program got cut. And she would have also been out of luck after all that risk and effort. Fortunately, she chose the path of going to the weaving school, where in my imagination, she was going to these great Bauhaus parties, really living it up. And there she met Josef, her future husband. So, while they're dancing along and she's, forging new paths with weaving, there were still other things to confront. In particular, the Nazis. As we all know, they showed up at one point, and for people of her heritage, things were not going to go well. So again, she had to decide, does she stay and face the risks that were involved in that? Or does she and Josef go to America, to this weird place called Black Mountain College? Does she give up her own identity and everything she's built up as an artist and designer? I think we know the answer to that, and I'm sure there were other obstacles along the way. But that story, by making it into this flow chart, we tried to articulate the winding path that many of us face in a career. So next I want to discuss the designer and architect Charlotte Perriand, also in the 1920s, like Ani. She's often strongly associated with the dude next to her, Le Corbusier. And she famously, arrived on the scene in Paris, all ripped up to be a modernist. And she knocks on Le Corbusier's door and he said, "We do not embroider cushions here." And he rejected her outright, just like Oskar. But of course, Charlotte also did not sit on the sofa. She kept things going, and she went out and did her own damn designs, including an awesome sort of loft apartment where she did built-ins and used industrial machinery to make cool, useful furniture. And Corb saw this and said, "Wah, you are hired. I have changed my mind." So they went on to do some collaborations over time. And then we conclude this sort of graphic novelization of Charlotte's storied career with many of her adventures, including a ski resort that she designs later in her career as an independent designer. And then we like to imagine her in this photograph, conquering the world, looking out over the Alps and having profound thoughts about the future of design, and also hopefully really enjoying some good cushions, because we believe that, I think history decided that embroidering pillows actually was a pretty worthwhile practice and that we can all enjoy it. So that's a little rollicking history of Charlotte. So then I'd like to move on into queer history, in particular, the team of Marcel Moore and Claude Cahun. You may know them. These are the assumed names of two stepsisters who disavowed gender, disavowed pronouns, completely went their own way in life, largely through collaboration, through intimate collaborations on a variety of things, from theater to poetry to criticism and writing. And they're especially well known for works like this, these collaborative photographs that often involve photo montage. And in the book, we look at a work that's very well known by them and incorporates graphic design, the self-published work Aveu non avenu, which translates to disavowed confessions. So they're already kind of messing with you, this idea, we're here, we're not here, we're here, we're queer, we're typographers, we're designers, we're photographers. And you can see from the book, they really exercised a lot of freedom, embracing modernist conventions, but also dipping into surrealism, and really establishing their own path in terms of image making, self-portraiture, and photo montage. Then finally, I want to conclude with some more contemporary queer designers, Susan Sontag and Willie Smith, and their relationship to furniture, which we decided to illustrate with. They're both sort of claiming their modern world, their not passive odalisques, such as Susan over there on the left. She is owning that Eames executive chair, and as you may know, she was a prolific writer and critic, and kept her life fairly private, but was quite adventurous intellectually and personally. And then we paired her with Willie over here on the right, sitting on Dan Friedman's riff on a Breuer chair and the related stool. And we explored their careers as, also sort of non-binary, as some of the challenges they faced. And I just want to conclude with some of the statements that really do reflect their careers and how it relates to the extra bold themes. So Susan, as you may know, sort of defined the idea of camp. And one of the key quote we used was, "Time liberates the work of art from moral relevance, delivering it over to the camp sensibility." And she, as we now know, it's Pride Week here in New York, and oh man, is there a lot of camp, that she helped to define that and allow it to be celebrated and truly delivered over to a new sensibility. And then for his part, Willie, is known as a designer, a fashion designer who really embraced the commercial, but not just as a capitalist venture, but really as a way to reach people, as an idea of democratizing design. So his designs were were made specifically for popular stores and lines. And as someone who likes sewing, I particularly enjoy that he created patterns that people could make his works and invent their own. So with that, I'd like to just conclude a little rollicking journey through some of the winding paths and adventures of a variety of designers. And with that, I'd like to hand it back to Ellen, who can hand it over to Silas. You're muted, Elk Frog.
There we go. Hi. I love that you ended with Willie Smith, because Cooper Hewitt has an amazing, historic, groundbreaking exhibition on the work of Willie Smith, which is now open again. Our museum is open. And the exhibition graphics are designed by Silas Munro, who also designed the incredible book and wrote such a moving kind of artist statement about what Willie Smith has meant to him and his generation. really incredible. So I'm going to pass it on to Silas, who is one of the contributors to Extra Bold and who helped create a roadmap for us to fill in some of these stories about queer design history. So thank you, Silas, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ellen and Jennifer. That was really amazing. It's been an honor to play a small part in such a rich book. I have my copy. Definitely get Extra Bold. It's really juicy, has a lot in it, and I'm going to go into a micro aspect of it that also has a lot of macro in it. So I'm going to be talking about gays, queers, fags, dykes, sissies, and abstract art and other alternative design histories. And as Ellen mentioned, yes, I run a studio called Polymode, and one of the projects we did get a chance to work on was the Willie Smith catalog and exhibition. You can see a couple of images there, but as a studio, we're very interested in what are the graphic voices of people who have been historically marginalized, as a person who's queer, as a Black person. I think that idea of representation design, both in terms of its history, but also in terms of its form, is really important. And at our studio, we have a process we call poetic research, which involves both kind of textual research, but also visual research and looking at the lateral, looking at the sort of like unexpected connections that one can find. And I felt like there was a lot of synchronicity among all of our talks between Willie Smith and many others. But when Ellen approached Polymode to make a diagram around queer history, she offered up this Cubism and Abstract Art by Alfred H. Barr, which is a seminal diagram for an exhibition he curated. He was the first director of the MoMA in 1936, and is a very compelling, interesting diagram, but also highly problematic, right? In the way that he sees modernism and modern art sort of coming out of or above notions of the exotic, whether it's Near Eastern art. He talks about Negro sculpture. And so Ellen invited us to make a queer parody or queer reinterpretation of this. And there's also an amazing similar thing around decolonization that Hank Willis Thomas has in the book. So definitely check that out as well. But this is our version, our response to Barr's diagram, our queer response, and is a collaborative work that was designed by me, my business partner, Brian Johnson, and then Ben Warner, who was a former student of mine, and maps from the antiquity to the present all of these queer lineages. And that idea of influence is really important to us. And I just wanted to sort of unpack what's underneath that. So, you know, that this diagram didn't start so complex and so rich. Part of our poetic research was looking at like photographs and images. You know, Jennifer mentioned Pride, you know, which started as a riot. It started as a riot of trans people of color pushing back against police brutality and oppression. Of course, Martha P. Johnson was a key figure in that. And so we were looking at these various timelines, both things from the 20th century, things from antiquity, queer materials. The One Archive in Los Angeles, which is one of the biggest archives of queer ephemera, was like a source that we were dipping into, but also things like Butt Magazine, the AIDS crisis and ACT UP, and all of the sort of collective action that goes into a history of queerness, and also the darker aspects of things. Jennifer mentioned the Nazis and the concentration camp tattoos, which become that ACT UP symbol and hanky code and all kinds of ephemera. And so that actually led us to try a few different directions for like, how do we try to counter Barr? And so for us, we started thinking about what are the kind of nodes within queer history and significant artifacts. You know, Sontag was mentioned, her notes on camp, this pink triangle, the Yellow Book, which is a publication from England that connects Aubrey Beardsley and and we tried to think about like what are some of the themes also that are connected to. And so I think one of the things that happens in poetic research is, right, how do you start to, in even the most crude way, like trace these lineages? We have the ballroom scene, we have drag, Elaine Locke. And then we sort of riffed and bounced off each other, like what happens if we take Barr's diagram and bring the rainbow in and make it dark? You know, what happens if instead of a linear diagram, we try something that's radial and try to sort of look at these kind of echoes of queer influence, you know, from the Rainbow Flag by Gilbert Baker to Pause Magazine and to like Marriage Equality. We even thought about trying to incorporate the images of our poetic research into this typographic projection. And ultimately, we felt like to really be a parody, it made sense to actually try to take Barr's visual language of red and black, but reinterpret it with queer type, which is the typeface escalator designed also by queer type designer Jesse Regan of XYZ. And to sort of add these sort of swishes. So instead of the lines being kind of linear, there's kind of more of a fluidity to them. And then you just have the themes that we landed on, and also really trying to make something that felt intersectional, like not just the Western sort of perspective, but also these idea of two spirits from indigenous histories, or pleasures of beaten peach, which is a translation of a ancient Chinese phrase for those who had same-sex attraction or relationships. And this became a map in dialogue with Ellen and Jennifer, and there was really this amazing call and response where they were researching things, we were learning from them, they were learning from us. And I feel like that's also part of what's interesting about this book is the collective authorship, right? And the dialogue, and that has a very clear sensibility, even if you're not gay. And so I just wanted to talk about how that helped me map out this idea of, well, if you're thinking about intersectionality, well, what about queerness in Black publications in the Harlem Renaissance? And one of my favorite quotes about the Harlem Renaissance is that it was as much gay as it was Black. And I'm blanking on the person who said that. Maybe someone in the chat can put it. He's the really well-known, Henry Louis Gates, Jr., historian. And so that led us to Elaine Locke, who was this amazing queer Black editor of Survey Graphic. He's the person who coined the term Harlem Renaissance, as well as the New Negro, which actually brought Aaron Douglas, the non-queer Black designer, to New York City. They ended up collaborating on the New Negro, along with his mentor, Vinod Reis. And then that also led to this younger generation of queer artists and designers who created this publication, Fire, and was connected to Langston Hughes. There's a love triangle, unrequited love between Langston Hughes and Elaine Locke, all this drama, which can be found in a really amazing book called The New Negro by Jeffrey Perkins. I highly recommend reading that if you want to know more about Elaine Locke and his kind of anti-Du Boisian perspective. And for Pride, was put in the chat earlier, you can now order a copy, your very own copy of an enlarged version of the queer diagram that could look nice in your studio or home or anywhere you want to take in queer lineages and queer histories. And I'm going to use the remaining part of my talk just to talk about this notion of lineage and how I feel like as we start to open up new dialogues around what design history is and what could be, that we can continue to expand this idea. One of a breakthrough for me was being able to contribute to this book about W.E.B. Du Bois, who's I knew about him as a historian and as an activist and sociologist, but I didn't know he was a data visualization expert. And so I got the chance to write about his groundbreaking 1900 infographics, where he and his students, men and women of color, created these pre-Bauhaus. This is 19 years before the Bauhaus, before Annie Albers had her dilemmas. that were installed in this exhibition, interactive, haptic experience where fairgoers could page through this. And speaking of Paris, this was installed in Paris in 1900. There were over 30 million people who came to that fair and may have seen this. At that time, Kandinsky was a young man and bopping around Europe. Who's to say he didn't see this? And there's some sort of influence in the Bauhaus. And they're just these amazing graphics that are activism and data visualization. I mean, this could be at home now in 2021. And so for me, I'm like, well, how come I didn't know about this? Like, little old me, Silas Munro, I had amazing design historians, Doug Scott, who has Yale pedigree at RISD, Lorraine Wild at Cal Arts, and like think about their teachers and influences. Philip Meggs, who wrote the first book on graphic design history, Paul Rand. We have Swiss designers like Herbert Matter, or other American designers like Bradbury Thompson, Lou Danziger, who wrote the first design history course at Cal Arts, and Kathy McCoy, who was a teacher of Lorraine Wild at Cranbrook. But like, I'm not represented in this amazing canon. I think what we can do moving forward is like break apart these ideas of like a linear history where it's all cis white men. And that's what Extra Bold does, is expand that and think about this idea of design history as a chosen family, like not just the influence of teachers and students like Gropius and Bayer at the Bauhaus or other kinds of colleagues, but we get to be like a chosen family. I get to choose Elaine Locke, or I get to choose W.B. Du Bois, or Brian, or Ben, or Ellen, or Ben, and that we can have this kind of like interconnected network of what influences us. So if there's things from these talks, you can kind of bring them back in to create your own design history. And that leads to this idea of like re-envisioning and remapping what is considered major, what is considered minor in the arc of design history. And so that led to this class, and I'll close with that, where I had a vision where what if you center a BIPOC experience in the design history instead of it being something that's in the marginality or not even there. And so you can now take, this was a live class, but asynchronously, you can take this class where you have 12 lecturers talk about the history of design from the perspective of the African-American and African diaspora. And I'm just gonna close with a couple-minute video where you can learn more about that.
Silas, we're not hearing the sound.
Oh, you're
think,
not? Sorry, thank you. Thank you for that.
I think you might have to reshare your screen.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Thank you.
Happens a million times a day.
That was really a good catch. Thank you. We are now here for a talk that I'm very excited about, and it's going to be given by Omari Souza, by Colette Gator, Audrey Bennett, the fabulous John Key.
My name is Kelly Walters.
Christopher Dingwall, Lauren Williams. We are going to be interweaving our voices together, which should be fun.
So what I'm going to talk about today is typography messages of protest for civil rights.
Talking about Black revolutions.
I'm excited to present Blackface and Minstrelsy Tradition.
All right, thank you guys for having me. Today's lecture is called Iterative Identity, Art Deco, World Fairs, and America's Limits on Humanity.
And we're going to be talking about Black queer stories in print, 19th century to the Harlem Renaissance. And we're really excited because a lot of our research overlaps.
So in this series, we've been talking about decolonizing and including BIPOC artists and designers into the conversation and the history of graphic design.
My mission is to confront historical racist theories and contemporary systemic racial oppression.
We will open it up to the floor.
How can I guess, continue to like this thing, but like in a healthy way that is beneficial to both me and people who I might be designing for in the future?
So my lecture and my criticism of design also comes from a place of love for design. But like James Baldwin said when talking about the United States, because I love her so much, I reserve the right to criticize her consistently. And that criticism is necessary for our field, especially with the idea of speculating a brighter future. I think what's really important for us to do really in terms of learning or exposing ourselves to new things, both for ourselves personally as designers, but also for people that are creating for other audiences, is begin to learn more about other cultures and how they communicate.
Graphic design education has been fundamentally based off of Western, white, European, male, white supremacy education. All of it, it doesn't challenge anything. So I think it's kind of like we figured out Darth Vader is our father, and we're kind of freaked out. And what do? We just have to talk about it.
Ooh, can we unmute and just very deep dive into design theory?
Woo!
Thank you so much.
Got our energy way up. Thank you, Silas. That's awesome.
Thank you so much for your presentations. This was amazing. Like, we have a lot of questions for you guys. But first of all, like, I want to congratulate you on the project and Silas and on the course. Like, it's really exciting. I want to take it. So first question, when is the next when is it starting the next round, the next course?
Oh, that's a good question. So in the middle of September, we are going to do a series on Latinx that is curated by Ramon Tejada. So he's calling it an incomplete series of courses, but it's looking at graphic design through various diasporas of Latinx experiences. So yeah, look for that. I think we're going to start doing tickets for that later this summer with a couple weeks in between September and October, and that'll be on the weekends too. So it's like a perfect boost to like adding new things into your fall curriculums, or for those who are just practicing designers to get inspiration.
Yes, awesome. Amazing. Yeah, I definitely want to join. And we are also hosting a series on Latin American design with another perspective focused on histories from Latin America. So it's all complementing each other. It's amazing an amazing initiative. I definitely want to attend. So we have a couple of questions about the process of writing the book. And so the first question would be, when did you start planning to about to write about this topic, and how was the process of collaborating with multiple authors?
Yeah, so we started the book in 2018 when I attended a program at Pratt Institute that was organized by two young women who were seniors at Pratt, Farah Cafe and Valentina Vergara. And they did their senior project about the missing women in their education. And so I approached them about collaborating on a book that would speak not only to the missing history, but also to the challenges of working and entering the profession and the kind of theoretical framework. And initially the book was going to be a feminist book. And as we did the research on feminism, that started to feel really exclusionary. And Jenny also joined the team, and she was very concerned that the idea of feminism was exclusive and was leaving some people out of the story. And so the book grew, and as it grew, we realized that it needed to have more voices creating it, more voices contributing to the book. And it was really cool. I've done a lot of collaborative books before because I do love co-authoring, and as a museum person, you know, a lot of the work that we do is collaborative. But this was really different and really fun and special.
Thank you, Ellen. And how did you narrow down the topics? Because it's so, you know, diverse potentially. How did you do that?
Well, there is no plan. I mean, the way that the book, we call it like, it's partly a zine, partly a comic book, partly like a farmer's almanac. It's just like a collection of stuff that we love and we're interested. I have whole files just of like chapters that we eliminated. There's whole chapters I wanted to write that we never got to, like why I hate away messages and why I think they're patriarchal. You know, there's just so much great material that will have to be in the sequel. But basically, you know, I have a certain number of pages and you can't fit everything in. And we just kind of built it on the fly, really more like a magazine than a proper book.
Yeah, so Francis is asking if maybe you're interested in collaborating on with a blog post. So maybe
sure.
Yeah, an amazing way of sharing this extra content. Thank you, Ellen. So we have a question for Jennifer. Gray Horn say that this is amazing. And how is the process of illustrating similar and not similar to writing as a method of design research?
Ooh, what a fun question. I guess to me, they're all wonderfully mixed up together. They're all just part of the same thing. Like I noticed sometimes when I would write things so that I could illustrate them. And then as I illustrated things, it's like, well, what did that look like? Or who is that person? Or, you know, how do you, you know, what did a printing press look like? And blah, 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 blah. So then that would cause me to do more research, which would cause me to, you know, update the writing and change the illustration. And it was just a wonderful, I think that's something I just enjoy so much in life is mixing up, you know, that making continuous the design, the writing, the illustrating, just a process of discovery and trying to communicate things in that form. Thank you for that question.
Thank you for your answer. What I really love about the book is how playful it is, and it's, you know, it's discussing like really important topics in a playful way. So it's amazing the way you guys do it. We have a question about also the process of writing and composing the book. What was the hardest part of writing and composing the book?
Stopping. We were so depressed when we were finished. It was just so much fun. I mean, it's really a challenge just to keep going, you know, to know what to put in and take out. There's a lot of editing. There's a lot of reprints of interviews that we had to edit to make shorter, a lot of original interviews conducted with people that we talked to live, and just a lot, it's a lot of service. I think people don't understand how much of writing a book is really about the kind of care, sort of care of content, care of the voices of all our contributors, the care of the accuracy, the care to have proper footnotes, right? So the book is very playful and fun and visual, but it is also really well researched, and it was very important to footnote scholars of color, to never claim, ownership of these histories, but to really plant them in the authentic context that they come from. And it's a work of care to do all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Ellen.
I would echo that. I just wanted to weigh in and just compliment the book, because I feel like that combination of playfulness, and especially with Jennifer, your illustrations, like I feel like it allows for a history that's accessible and non-exclusionary visually. And there's something about the visual language of your drawings that allows you're transported into history in a different way than when you look at photographs or archival. Like there's something very speculative by you making it have this sort of comic book voice, and it's so juicy and delightful, and unexpected. And I feel I need to just say that.
No, I really
here.
Yeah, that was sort of a discovery process, because I come out of more of an academic, like documentary, like it has to be the original, blah blah blah. But I was just like, no, like you just gotta. It's part of communicating and editing and stuff. And yeah, I see similar challenges, but on the mega scale with the chart. I mean, Barr had trouble enough, trying to get a flawed story, and it was just so lovely to see how you, in this talk, I didn't realize your process, so I really enjoyed seeing that background to how you got to where the wonderful chart that we see in the end.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it was that care, like Ellen, that you gave as the curator. You really encouraged us to actually make it more inclusive too. Like as we were discovering things, like, have you thought about this? And it was always a way to make it better. And like for us, it also feels like a version, kind of like your book too. Like
absolutely.
There's more that could be added. There's like
the
more
tree
stories.
can grow and grow.
Yeah. And maybe that's kind of, it almost feels like the book is a toolkit for other people to do their own research and scholarship to build on what you've created so well.
Yes, definitely. Silas, we have a question that was addressed to Ellen, but I want to ask you the question and then go back to Ellen, because I think it's a really interesting conversation. So Michael Dooley asked how your own design history teaching has changed, evolved over the years, and how and the idea of throwing the Bauhaus under the bus, when that started, like populating your mind.
Yeah, oh my gosh, it keeps changing so much. It's such a great question, where the discovery, and it's been very emotional, I think, where it's sort of like shocking the gaps of what wasn't given to me. And I feel like it's also been very empowering to also realize that as a scholar, as an educator, and I'm sure I know Ellen and Jennifer feel the same way, that we can evolve and we have to evolve. We keep evolving as we teach. It's not a static thing. And so I think even like previous iterations of myself, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm cringing at the way that I taught history before, So I think that giving yourself permission to also be a student, that's, I think, what this really is about. Like that we need to be quite adventurous and take risks, and also do our due diligence, as Ellen, says, like the accuracy. And I think as you know more about history, it's also painful because so much of history has erased things that are horrible. So you have to face some serious darkness. And I think when you're throwing the Bauhaus under the bus, you tread the line between this thing that's utopian, but then charge women more and only let them weave or bind books, you know?
Uh-huh. Well, I don't want to throw the Bauhaus under the bus. And so I'm imagining the Bauhaus as this, old lady with a walker. And I just want to like save her from getting hit by the bus. And yet I understand exactly what you're saying, and the way I'm approaching this in my teaching as someone who has spent a lot of time studying the Bauhaus and loving the Bauhaus, is trying to tell the story in a new way. For example, Moholy-Nagy was, the most important figure at the Bauhaus, and he was an immigrant, and he came to the school and didn't speak English well, and was not well liked by the established older gentlemen, the eminence gris, of Klee and Kandinsky. They really thought he was an upstart. And so just thinking about other ways to look at the Bauhaus experience, the experience of women. Again, Moholy-Nagy was married to Lucia Moholy, who actually had experience in the publishing industry, unlike Laszlo, and probably had a big role in designing those books that he's so famous for. So I think we can look at the story of the Bauhaus and take it apart, and also look at how that language comes ultimately out of African art, that there's no Bauhaus without Cubism, there's no Cubism without African art, and that Marcel Breuer in 1921 made a chair called the African chair. And of course, that's all appropriation, and it was, not at all respectful of historical origins. But at some point, we have to, I think, look at how to tell these stories so that they become inclusive and problematized, and we reveal these power struggles. And that it doesn't mean we have to shut the book. There's research now on queer Bauhaus and Jewish Bauhaus and women in the Bauhaus. And it's just a more interesting story to be told there, that we can still share with our students, this incredible influential moment in history that's like a myth, which it really is. It's a myth, and we can tell that myth in new ways. So that I want to save them.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being
I want the last word.
Generous. You want the last question?
No, I think there should be another question. I don't want the last thing to be me trying to save the Bauhaus.
So we do have one more question that and it's about the diagram. Are there women included in the diagram? So
of course, yes.
Yeah, so that's
sure.
the question from
yes.
Zora.
Yeah,
Should not see it.
Totally. Yeah, there's Black lesbians are a huge part, right? And trans and non-binary folks are a huge part of queer histories, and I think that's why the title is there. And I think also, if you think about queer culture, and this kind of happens in our time of pride, is that it does get kind of whitewashed, right? And it also gets sort of put from a male perspective. And I think that's also part of my work as someone who has male privilege, even though I'm queer and a person of color, I think there is, to Ellen's point, there is this complicating things, and also knowing when to step back, right? And hold space for others or to honor others. And I think that was a significant, I mean, Audre Lorde is on the diagram, you know, like the power of the radical power of the erotic, you know, she's a scholar, but also sort of a visionary of that, and that's woven into Octavia Butler is in the diagram, you know, so Dykes on Bikes, like, you know, there's so much in there, and that's kind of showing just like, it just showed kind of parts of it, so it's definitely worth like spending time with it to see all of the connections. You know? And thanks for that critical question. I love the challenge.
Good. So I think it's time. Thank you so much for doing this, guys. It was amazing. It's a different format for us. We have first time we have so many panelists having like and I love this format. Do you want to share like final thoughts besides go buy the book and join the course?
Go make history. Yeah. Graphic design history has always been created by graphic designers. And we've told a certain story. I mean, we is the wrong word, you know. A certain story has been told by graphic designers. And now it's graphic designers like Silas and Tashika, Raquel, who are telling new stories. And it's really fantastic. So thank you for your amazing work.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Silas. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Ellen. Thank you, everyone that joined us this evening. If you want to keep posted about our upcoming programs, check our websites. And I hope you have a good rest of your week. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.